Welcome to the STARS program, seniors taking active roles in society. And now, here's your host, ANITA FINLEY.
Let's talk to Darwin Porter, who's calling in from Staten Island. Good morning.
Good morning, Anita. This is the first time we've spoken in 2019.
That's right.
I won't wish you a happy new year because W.C. Fields said anyone who is happy is a moron. So I'll wish you a healthy and prosperous new year.
Okay.
You know?
Thank you, Darwin.
All I know is that 2019, I think, will be the year of the journalists. It will be manna from heaven raining down on journalists who will be able to keep the 24-hour cable news cycle bumming along all through the year. In fact, books may be written on 2019. At least that's everything I hear. The gypsy fortune tellers and the pundits on radio and television are certainly predicting it's going to be a hot time in America in 2019. And who knows? We just go forward and see what's going to happen.
Oh, my goodness. I know that the politics is really deep. But you know what? I have faith. I have confidence. And we have you this morning. So I have to just say that the Green Book, which a lot of people haven't known about, and I did a review about it coming up in our January issue, but anyone who goes to see it, they're just enthralled.
Yes, you mentioned it last time. I still haven't had a time to see it. You wouldn't believe it, but I've been very busy.
Oh, of course I would believe it. Are you kidding? So
yes,
tell me.
But the one thing I want to mention now is the New York Times yesterday said Nancy Pelosi is second in line for the presidency, and of course that's just a typo. They knew better. She's third in line.
Right.
The House Speaker, Mike Pence, would step into the presidency. But now, what's interesting is everybody is going to be talking about Nancy Pelosi, but I found out that a lot of people don't know a great deal about her. And without taking any political side, because she is both loved and hated, she did make the 10 most admired women list. For the first time in 3 years, Mrs. Obama became number one, beating out Hillary Clinton. And but both the First Lady and Nancy made the 10 most admired, because we have such a divided country, you know. But the most startling thing that a lot of people don't know about Nancy is she's really a daughter of the South.
Well, I don't know that. Right.
Yeah. Well, she was born in Baltimore, and Maryland is south of the Mason-Dixon line, so that would make her a daughter of the South. I mean, most people associate her as being a California, but that's not true. She's a daughter of the South. In fact, her father was the mayor of Baltimore, and she was born in the Little Italy section of, there's a Little Italy, New York, but also Little Italy in Baltimore. And her father was Thomas D'Alessandro, the mayor, and she remembered as a little girl, he would have people to his living room, and he would be dispensing favors to them for helping him get, and also her brother became mayor of Baltimore.
Huh.
And as she was growing up, her idol was John F. Kennedy, and he came to Baltimore to visit. She was 16 years old, and somehow she arranged it to sit beside her idol at lunch, and she was very attractive. And he allegedly flirted with a 16-year-old girl. Scandal.
Well, she's still attractive when you think about, I don't know how old she is. Do you have that?
I do.
Okay, how old is she?
Well, she's not a baby boomer. She was born in March of 1940. And in fact, I think that didn't even qualify her as a war baby, because we didn't enter the war till December of 41. So she was born in 1940. Now, the interesting thing is she is married to a man of San Francisco. that explains why she's in San Francisco.
Ah.
His name is Paul Belaski. Now, he is a brilliant real estate and venture capital investor, and he just makes one great business deal after another, including a lot of real estate in California. Some people estimate his fortune at $100 million.
So, and the thing I liked about her is while she was doing all these things she's done, she reared 5 children, right?
Yes, she has 5 children and 9 grandchildren. And I'll tell you, her 8-year-old granddaughter and 9-year-old son, they virtually took over the swearing-in ceremony.
I saw that.
They were just adorable, I thought. And one of them came up to Kevin McCarthy, who was losing his House Speaker role, and he said, "You stop bullying my grandmother."
You're kidding? I didn't hear that. Oh, that's very cute.
So he already was protecting his grandmother, and I thought that was a wonderful thing.
It is.
Actually, to make names easier, I'll just call him Paul Pulaski. He was born 3 weeks after Nancy, so he always told people, "I married an older woman."
Oh, that's cute.
And the first time I met her was at 21, which has been a popular restaurant. Actually, it was a favorite of Donald Trump. And this was about 1963 or 64. And I was with my boss, and he had worked with Joan Crawford on the Pepsi-Cola advertisement. You know, she'd been married to Alfred Steele, and Joan liked to make an entrance, and I got to tag along, and we paraded into 21. And, you know, Joan also looked the room to see if she had to say hello, and seated at one table was Barbara Walters, and she was sitting there with 2 people I'd never heard of called Paul and Nancy Pulaski. Now, they had just gotten married, but he took her out of Baltimore, and many people don't know this, but they lived in New York during the rest of the 60s. He, a native of San Francisco, he took her back there in 69. So I got to meet Nancy. As I said, I didn't know who she was. The thing that impressed me about her is she was one of the best looking women, and I don't want to be immodest, but that dress was most tasteful clothing. She could put Marilyn Monroe and Jane Russell and Mamie Van Doren to shame.
No, really, she did look very good. Yes, she did, and she
was called a hot number.
Oh.
But a good-looking woman. And now, Paul was no Errol Flynn or Tyrone Power, but he was what the village people would call macho man. And she married well. Now, he did say something that day, because we had a drink later after lunch. He said, you know, Marilyn Monroe sang diamonds are a girl's best friend. But he said, you know how I won Nancy's heart? Giving her boxes of chocolate.
Really? Really?
He said, that's a hell of a lot cheaper than diamonds. And,
that's wonderful.
Nancy is a chocolate addict, but she doesn't put on weight.
Huh.
And anyway, so she did go to live in San Francisco, and a city for which she has been forever associated. And the next I heard of her, I think I told you, I used to work in San Francisco because my company had an office there. But also I started doing a book for Fromer called Fromer San Francisco. So I got to visit it every year. And I had a good friend who was a champion swimmer named Stephen White, and he was dating Janis Joplin. I'm sure you remember her.
Oh, yes.
And they asked me to go with them to Nancy had thrown open her home. She had a big mansion. And, of course, I went along. And as I said, the name didn't really mean anything. Of course, once I saw her again, I recognized her. And this time she was in a sort of a blue satin gown. She always tried to wear high heels that matched the color of her gown. And I don't want to be indelicate, but there was some plunging décolletage there. And she was utterly charming and graceful. And, but again, she was just the wife of a San Francisco millionaire.
Right.
Then I saw her a couple more times in San Francisco, but I never saw her in Washington. But in 1984, she led the California delegation to the convention that nominated Walter Mondale.
Huh.
So she was on TV a lot. And then the next thing I heard of her was in 1987. There was this congresswoman named Sala, S-A-L-A, Burton. And she called Nancy to her dying bed, and she said, "Nancy, I've got cancer, and it's traveling all over my body, and I want you to run in my place." And Nancy ran for Congress and was elected. So she carried out that death bed request from Mrs. Burton, and then she hit Washington. And I will tell you this: she rose very quickly. When she got there, I think there were only 23 women. Of course, it's very different now because you saw on television the diversity of women are certainly coming in by the droves, and not only that, some are gay and lesbian, some are Native American, some are in Arab dress. I mean,
I know it.
People say the new Congress now represents the diversity of America.
Yeah, that's true. And I was so thrilled for this. I mean, no matter what your political ambitions or your political philosophy is, I think this is the right thing to do. And it will be very interesting to hear their opinions and what they want. But I still think we're having, a terrible time with, and I'll just say that with the president. This is just not going well.
Oh, yes. It's going to be, it's just going to be one of those, it will outrank, anything Richard Dixon, I started to say Richard Dixon.
Right.
Richard Nixon, ever did. I think, it's going to be, that's going to look like a harmless Watergate break-in.
Yep, I know it.
Because big stuff is on the way. But Nancy immediately began asserting herself as a congresswoman, and she and Elizabeth Taylor teamed up to...
Elizabeth Taylor?
Yes, to fight the AIDS crisis, because at that time Ronald Reagan had even mentioned AIDS. And it was sweeping the world and America, and people were dying. And at that time, it was sort of written off as something Haitians or gay people got. And Nancy took the position. She said, "Don't be a moron. Anybody who has a bloodstream, a baby, a woman, a man, can get AIDS." And of course, she and Elizabeth Taylor were right, because the disease, and it still has been controlled a bit, but people are dying all over the planet from AIDS. But it's interesting that was one of the first things that she took up as a battle to get help. And indeed, as you know, there have been medical breakthroughs. So right away, she saw a problem and set out to conquer it. And she changed a lot of minds, because it just seems insane that people thought that would be limited originally to Haitians and gays, because it's bloodstream.
Yeah.
I know. We had to, but now this is how she moved up. In 2001, she was elected the Democratic whip, and no woman had ever had that position. And I remember seeing pictures of her then. She had a button on that said, "We've waited more than 200 years for this day.
Oh, no
And
kidding.
she meant women, and have waited for that.
Right.
And then by 2007, she became historically a figure, the 52nd first woman Speaker of the House. Actually, she replaced a man called Dennis Hartett, and he went on to a bad end. You know, he's had to pay out millions of dollars on the charges of sexual molestation of the young athletes he had under his supervision, and so he sort of ended his speakership in disgrace.
Yes.
But now, a lot of people may not remember that, but in 2008, this country was in very serious trouble. It was the Wall Street, the economy was going downhill, and then Nancy became one of the speakers for the bailout, the Wall Street bailout that was vital to get the economy going again. I think they pumped about $800 billion into the economy to put us on the road again. And also, Nancy became one of the most powerful fundraisers in the history of the Democratic Party. She raised at least $800 billion, which is a lot of money.
Yes.
And then the thing that came, the downfall of the Democratic Party, Nancy didn't get one vote from a Republican, but she actually goaded Obama into endorsing the affordable health care. He was a reluctant debutante.
Is that right?
She forced the issue. In fact, actually it's now named after him. They could have called it Nancy Care. And of course, this was the most unpopular thing. It cost the Democrats the elections in the House in 2010, and she was out of a job. And the day after she passed it, I'll always remember watching her on television. She had to go through a gauntlet of the most horrible attacks. One big sign said, Nancy Pelosi, America's bitch of Buchenwald.
Really? Now, I didn't know this.
If anyone remembers that horrible Nazi horror, known in history as the woman who made lampshades out of the skins of Jewish victims sent to the gas chamber. I mean, oh God, I mean, the Buchenwald, I was visiting there and they had pictures of her. But it's even, regardless of your politics, it's very hard to equate Nancy with the bitch of Buchenwald.
Yeah.
I mean, she was trying to give health care to people, not to kill them for their skin.
Right.
So I think she took a bad rap on that. And regardless of your politics, I sort of felt sorry for her so she had, but now what has happened, the interesting thing, and you know this better than anyone, is now healthcare is popular.
Yeah.
The latest poll that came out yesterday said that healthcare is a major issue. Now, the GOP has tried to gut it 40 times, but they didn't have the votes. And sort of John McCain made a hero of himself because he cast the vote for it and earned the ire of our president for doing so, but he saved it. It needs work because people tried to gut it. And so Nancy has pledged to return to health care and try to provide as much health care as she can for people. And I can only applaud her. And I'm glad that America is now on the side of affordable health care for everybody.
Well, I absolutely agree with you. And I always say if they ought to, any congressperson ought to have the same health care that the people have. And if the people can't get it, well, then they shouldn't have it. I've always said
that's right. Congress people, man or woman, they get the best health care.
Exactly.
And, you know, in fact, there was one man on television the other night. He said, I was against Nancy, and against the affordable health care. And he said, my little son got cancer. He was about 9 years old. He got cancer. And he said, so the health care saved my son's life. And so many Americans have actually benefited, and they have converted to health care. Now, so what's going to happen? Nancy has got a very difficult position because in both parties now, you've got firebrands who are just militant on, and she's going to have to walk the line, as indeed the Mitch McConnell will too, because he has men like Jim Jordan. I mean, well, he's a congressman, not a senator, but you know, they want to almost set fires in Washington, and now Nancy's got on the other side the fiery people who yesterday, one of them, I don't know if you've been watching the news, used the MF word.
No, I didn't see that.
Yes, it's called, apparently in the history of the Republic, you know, no one has ever called the president with the MF word.
Yeah, well, I have to just say that it's now, I used to love to watch the news, but I find myself taking it so seriously, and I can't believe it. So I just have to go watch other things, Darwin. It's just too hard anymore.
It's going to be a fantastic year. It will be very sad. Some people are going to end up in jail, and their families will break their hearts. And it's going to be a very sad time for everybody. But it will also mark the end of the reign of the I will call them the oldest of the baby boomers.
Yeah.
Now, Nancy was not a baby boomer, but the baby boomers would be people like Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, and we buried George H.W. Bush, the hero of World War II. Robert Dole is still alive. You may have seen in the paper the last survivor of Pearl Harbor. An African-American man died at the age of 112. Cigars and brandy.
Well, let me say that at our expo coming up, we have the sailor who made the famous kiss of the nurse that appeared in Life magazine, and he's going to be at our expo, and he signs photographs. He's terrific. His name's Carl, and yeah, we put him on the cover of our upcoming January issue. So, yeah, there are a lot of these people.
The sailor with
yes,
the kiss?
Yes. Uh-huh.
You're kidding.
No, I'm not kidding. I wish you could come to the expo. Anyway, I think we've run out of time.
My former boss at the University of Miami, Wilson Hicks, was the one. He was the photo editor of Life magazine, and he ran that photo.
Oh, that's interesting. You and I have to talk about that, because I then can talk more about it when I introduce him at the expo. I'll call you.
So okay, well, listen, let's get through this year. It's going to be a hell of a ride.
I hope I get to see you, too, in 2019. I missed you in 2018.
That would be wonderful.
It would be.
Monday or Tuesday, I'll be sending you a present.
You will?
So open it with care.
Anything you send me, I will open up, honey.
Okay.
Thank you so much. All right, bye.